So let's get started with the Mac right here. The Mac, as the Windows computer, comes with such text-based tools which enable us this text-based interaction. And on the Mac, you're doing this via the so-called terminal. Now, the terminal is the text input environment. It's the hardware, so to say. And you could think about this like your computer. So just the hardware, not the software on it, just a plain computer. You need something, at least some environment, to be able to enter these commands in the end, and that's the terminal. The terminal on the Mac looks like this in the end. Now, the problem is that with the hardware alone, you cannot do a lot, right? Because a computer with the hardware only and no software, well, you can't do too much with it, right? For this, we also have terminal software, so to say, and this software is the so-called shell. The shell is the text input interface. As I said, you could think about it as the software, so the part that brings your computer to life. With the example of our text-based interaction with the machine, you could say we need that shell, that software, to translate our commands for the computer to make sure the computer understands what exactly we want to achieve right now. For example, we might want to change a folder or access a folder. On the Mac, we have two different shells, two different text input interfaces. The first one and the older one is the so-called bash, and the latest one is the Z or ZSH, the so-called Z shell. So these are the core terms you have to keep in mind when you talk about the terminal or text-based interaction on a Mac. On a Windows machine, things look a bit different here. On Windows, we don't have that clear differentiation between the terminal and the shell. We actually have three different options on the Windows machine. The first one is the command prompt, the CMD. That's the very traditional, the initial Windows shell. And the command prompt and the shell, in contrast to the Mac, where we had the terminal and the shell, are kind of mixed together here. So if you open the command prompt, you open the hardware, which also has the corresponding software on it. So terminal, shell, here command prompt only. The command prompt looks like this. Besides the command prompt, we have a more up-to-date shell, you could say, and that's the so-called PowerShell. The PowerShell is the new shell, which was released with the release of Windows 7, and it looks a bit different, as you can see right here. And besides the background color, it looks quite similar to the command prompt, but very importantly, these are two very different things in the end. This applies to both the concepts behind it and also the commands that can be used in that PowerShell and in that command prompt. As a third option, we also have the Git Bash. Again, this is a Git course, so we have to consider this. The Git Bash is a bash emulation for Windows. Now you think about bash, what about this bash thing? We had this when we talked about the Mac. Yes, indeed we had that. And comparing the bash with the command prompt or the PowerShell would give us a lot of differences. Therefore, if you work with Git, you can also install this Git Bash to have a more similar shell experience when you're working on the Mac and on a Windows machine simultaneously. We'll dive into the Git Bash a bit later throughout the course, but for the purpose of the course and for using Git in general, the Git Bash is not necessarily required. So we have these two things, the Mac and the Windows machine, we have different shells. What do we use now in this course? Well, we want to keep things simple, we want to focus on Git. Therefore, we will use two different so-called command line tools in our course. One for our Windows machine, one for the Mac users. On Windows, we will use the command prompt, the CMD, so this very traditional approach, which looks like this. And we follow this approach as some of you might use Windows 7 or later versions, but some of you also might have older Windows versions. Therefore, it's a very good starting point to learn the command prompt. Then you can dive into the PowerShell if required. For the Mac, it's quite easy. We use the terminal and we use the latest Z shell, which looks like this. So these are the command line tools basics. Now we know what we want to work with. Therefore, it's time to explore how these tools work. For this, make sure to choose the dedicated section of this module, depending on whether you are a Mac user or a Windows user. And then, well, let's continue. So let's dive into the terminal or Z shell basics for the Mac here. And to do this, we need a Finder window first, so make sure to open one. And in this Finder window, let me add it right here maybe. So in this Finder window, go to Locations and there select your machine. In my case, this is my MacBook. And here select the Macintosh HD, so your hard disk drive. That's the first thing. And additionally, we also need a new terminal. You can find this with the Spotlight search. So you press Command and Shift and then simply enter terminal and confirm this. And with that, a new terminal should be displayed. Let me maybe align those two a bit to make sure you can see everything like this. So we got the Finder and the terminal, or the Z shell here. You can see this by this ZSH shortcut I mentioned already. And before we dive into the terminal, let's have a look at what we can see here in our Finder. As I said, we have access to our HD right here, and in there we have the so-called root directory or the root folder. In this root directory, we have system relevant data, for example, our installed applications, here's some system data, and very important for our purposes here, this users folder. If you select this, we get some new information, and we are in the so-called, users directory. So keep that in mind. The first level right here is the root directory, and with the users folder, we get access to our users directory. Here you can see the users you have on your machine. In my case, I only have myself as a user. And if I select this user again, well, then I'm here in my so-called home directory. So these are three things to keep in mind. You have the root directory right here, you have the users directory, and you have that home directory. Why is this important for us? Well, because in the right part here, when we started a new terminal, we also have kind of a starting point, you could say, and you see this Lawrence M, so basically my username, at my MacBook here. And we have this tilde symbol. I'll come back to this in a few minutes. Now, to find out where we currently are located, we can enter our first command here. And this command is pwd, print working directory, so print the current directory we are currently at. If we confirm this via enter, we see we are in /users/Lawrence M. And if we go back to our Finder here, we see that we have this users folder, so this right here is our users folder, and we have this slash ahead of it. Well, and this slash at the beginning simply means that we are in our root directory here. In this root directory, we go then into our users folder. This means we are in the users directory now. And in this users directory, we access our current user, as we can see it right here. And this means by starting our terminal, we are here in our home directory. So pwd allows us to see where we're currently at. I can also prove this to you if I enter the next command here. This command is ls. ls stands for list items, so all the items we have in our current folder, in our current directory. And if we confirm this, you see we have exactly the same folders that we see right here to the left in our Finder. But of course, we are not limited to being in this home directory. We can also access other directories. And this brings us back, for example, to this tilde symbol here, because the tilde symbol is simply the indicator that we are currently in this home directory here. But we can also navigate to upper hierarchy levels, meaning we can go from the home directory to the users directory or back to the root directory. To change the current directory, you can use another command. This command is cd for change directory. If you simply type cd right here and confirm this, then you can again see this tilde symbol. The same thing is true if you type cd and then the tilde, this would be alt and n, and confirm this. You see we are again obviously in this tilde folder. So the tilde symbol shows us that we are in our home directory. If we want to move up one hierarchy to our users directory here, we simply type cd again and now enter 2 dots. 2 dots simply means go up one hierarchy level starting from our current directory. In our case, the home directory. This means now we are in our users directory. This is no specific symbol like the tilde. This simply is /users. We know that the slash is the indicator for the root directory, and then we go into our users folder. What you can see here already though is that our Z shell here is kind of filled with content. So to make sure you can start at the top again, you can simply type the clear command. If you do that, we get back our initial start here, but we didn't lose our previous commands. You can simply scroll up a bit, and as you can see, nothing is lost here. It just helps us to keep things a bit more organized. With that, we are in our users directory now, but what if you want to go up another step to our root directory? Well, then you can again type cd and space ... If you do that, you are now in that root directory, indicated by that slash right here. And besides that, you could also navigate to your root directory via cd and then by entering this slash symbol here. So if you do that, confirm this, you are again in the root directory. If you want to go back to the home directory now, for example, what would you do then? Well, then you would type cd alt n, so tilde, and confirm this, With that, you are back right here. And for the users directory, you would simply enter cd/users like this. And this will bring you back to your users directory. So these are the first core things to keep in mind here. You have 3 main directories on your machine here: root, users, and home directory. And when you start a new terminal, you enter the home directory. By the way, you can always quit an existing terminal with Command Q. I won't do this right here, but you can do this, and then restart a new one by opening the Spotlight search and then searching for the terminal, as we just learned it at the beginning of this lecture. Besides these directories, we also saw that we can change between these with the cd command, which allows us to change our directory. But of course, we cannot only move hierarchy levels up or target specific directories as we did it right here. We can also navigate into specific folders. For example, here in our home directory, we could access one of these folders that you can see right here. This is what we will tackle as a next step. So let's dive a bit deeper into the cd command right here. As a first step, I would like to access this Lorentz M path right here, and we saw that we can do this with the cd and tilde command, but I would like to use a different one, because if I again type cd and a space and now enter the first letter of this folder or of this path where I want to navigate to, and then hit tab, then I see that I get an auto completion which automatically targets, well, this path right here. In case you have multiple options, starting with LNmakers, for example, you would get these different suggestions. If I confirm this, you can see by the tilde symbol once again, I am here now in my home directory. And if I want to navigate into a specific folder, let's say this ZZ folder down here, or let's maybe delete this folder and let's create it together now. So we create a new folder and name it ZZ. So here in our Finder. So if we now want to access this folder, you can again type cd space and now simply a single Z and tab. If you confirm this, you're now in this folder. And interestingly, we don't have a slash right here or slash users. Here we have simply the name of the folder we currently have access to. So with that little information right here, you can always see which folder you currently access. If you want to go back, for example, you can simply enter cd ... Then you are back here in the home directory and you can then access any folder you want. For example, if we go to that CZ folder and create a new one, and let's say we call this practice, just like this, then you could again go to your terminal, say cd, now type the Z, tab, and now enter the practice folder, can enter some letters, press tab, and with that you get access to this folder. One important note maybe at this stage, if we create another folder here in our Finder, now call it ZZ, maybe space, and also type space right here, so it should contain 2 words with a space in between in the end. And if we would now access this folder, then we first have to go up 1 hierarchy level from our practice folder, so like this. Then we are in the ZZ folder. Then we again go up 1 hierarchy level to be in our home directory once again. And now we can simply type cd, Z, and now press tab 2 times. And now you see we have 2 options. We can either access our ZZ folder, this one right here, or the ZZ space folder. But, very important, the space in between our naming here must be indicated by a backslash here. Otherwise, well, you can't access folders like this. So in our case, if you want to access this folder, just type the backslash, which is Shift, Alt, and 7 here. Add a space, that's important, and then the second word of that folder name, space, and then confirm this with enter. You don't have to add the slash you saw at the end right here. It's not required for our purposes here at the moment. With that, we are now in this ZZ space folder. We navigated around quite a bit, but we didn't explore a specific concept, which is important to understand the way we navigate right here. Because as you saw, I just told you that we are here in our practice folder, then we navigate 1 level up and another level up, and then we go into our ZZ space folder. So we always started our navigation relative from the current location in our folder structure. This means we use so-called relative paths. Now, besides relative paths, we also have absolute paths. So as a next step, it's time to dive a bit deeper into this relative and absolute path concept.